investigative files pertaining to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann begin not with the immediate calls to emergency services, but with the architectural blueprints and booking records of the Ocean Club resort in Praia de Luz, Portugal. To understand the trajectory of the inquiry, one must first analyze the physical parameters of the location and the established timeline of the group involved. The resort itself is a sprawling complex, not a single hotel block, consisting of various apartments, pools, and recreational areas woven into the existing town infrastructure. According to land registry documents, the primary focus of the inquiry, apartment 5A, was situated on the corner of a block known as the Waterside Gardens. Investigators noted early in the process that this ground floor unit was accessible from two distinct points. The front door opened onto the street, utilizing a standard lock and key mechanism. The rear access consisted of sliding patio doors that led to a small terrace and a gate, which opened directly to a public pathway and the resort swimming pool. Procedural analysis of the site indicates that the patio doors could be locked from the inside via a latch, but did not require a key to open from the interior. This specific mechanical detail would become a focal point for forensic teams attempting to reconstruct ingress and egress. The street-facing front door was, according to statements provided by the parents, kept locked at all times. The rear patio door, however, was the primary entry point used by the adults during the evenings to avoid carrying keys or navigating the longer route around the block. The timeline of the incident is anchored in the arrival of the group on Saturday, April 28th, 2007. Airline manifests confirm that Jerry and Kate McCann, along with their 3 children, traveled from the United Kingdom to Faro Airport. They were accompanied by a group of 7 friends and their children, a collective that would later be referred to in police files as the Tapas 7. Upon arrival, the group established a specific routine, documented in resort logs and later corroborated by witness testimony during the initial inquiry. Resort records show that the children were enrolled in the daily kids' club activities. Attendance sheets indicate that Madeleine and her younger siblings spent significant portions of the day under the supervision of resort staff. The daily schedule typically involved a drop-off in the morning, a lunch break with parents, and afternoon sessions. This routine is critical as it establishes the window of time in which the family was separated and the specific hours they were together within the apartment. The geography of the evenings is equally significant. The group chose to dine at the Tapas restaurant, an open-air establishment located within the pool complex. According to measurements taken by law enforcement, the distance between the dining table and apartment 5A was approximately 55 meters in a straight line, or roughly a 90-second walk. However, investigators noted that the direct line of sight from the table to the apartment terrace was obstructed by a wall and vegetation. This physical barrier meant that the parents could not visually monitor the patio doors from their dining location. To mitigate this lack of visibility, the group instituted a roving check system. Rather than utilizing the resort's baby listening service, a decision noted in the initial report without judgment, but marked as a deviation from available safety protocols. The adults agreed to take turns leaving the table to physically inspect the sleeping children. The logs of these checks became the backbone of the timeline for the night of May 3rd. The weather reports for the evening of May 3rd, 2007, indicate conditions were cool with a slight breeze. Sunset occurred at 21 minutes past 8 in the evening. The timeline leading up to the disappearance begins in the late afternoon. According to the statements, Kate McCann picked up the children from the kids' club at 5:30 in the afternoon. The family returned to apartment 5A. Between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock, tennis court booking records place Jerry McCann at a lesson. A photograph, later analyzed for timestamps, was taken at 2:29 in the afternoon by the poolside, showing the McCanns and another family member. This image serves as the last verified visual record of the child prior to the evening timeline. Procedural notes indicate the family began their bedtime routine around 7 in the evening. The children were dressed in their sleepwear. Madeleine was wearing a pink short-sleeved pajama top with a graphic of Eeyore and matching bottoms. By 7:30, the children were placed in the bedroom facing the front of the apartment. The layout analysis shows this room had a single window equipped with an external metal shutter. This shutter was operated from the inside by a strap. Kate McCann stated in her initial deposition that the window and shutter were closed to darken the room. The twins were placed in travel cots in the middle of the room, while Madeleine occupied a single bed against the far wall. The bedroom door was left slightly ajar to allow light to filter in from the main living area. By 8:30 in the evening, the children were asleep. The parents prepared for dinner. A bottle of wine was opened in the apartment, evidence of which was later catalogued by technicians at the location. At approximately 8:35, the parents left the apartment. They exited through the rear patio doors. Crucially, the statement provided by the parents indicates they pulled the doors shut, but did not lock them, as the locking mechanism could only be engaged from the inside. This left the apartment technically unsecured from the rear, although the heavy sliding doors required effort to operate. The group convened at the Tapas restaurant at 8:40. The booking sheet for the restaurant confirms a reservation for 9 adults and 4 high chairs. The table was situated near the center of the dining area. The first documented check of the evening occurred at approximately 9:05. Jerry McCann left the table to check on his children. According to his statement, he entered via the unlocked patio doors. He noted that the bedroom door, which had been left slightly ajar, was now open to a wider angle of approximately 45 degrees. He proceeded to physically check the room, observed all 3 children asleep, and pulled the door back to its original ajar position before leaving. He briefly considered the position of the door, but attributed the change to a draft. On his return to the restaurant, Jerry McCann briefly spoke with a fellow vacationer, Jeremy Wilkins, on the pathway. This interaction, verified by Wilkins, places Jerry McCann outside the apartment block shortly after 9:10. It was during this interval that a significant witness sighting occurred. At approximately 9:15, Jane Tanner, one of the 7 friends, left the table to check on her own children. She later reported to investigators that she observed a male carrying a child walking away from the apartment block area. This individual was described as walking with purpose, carrying a child dressed in light-colored pajamas. This sighting was logged into the investigation files and became a primary line of inquiry for years, though its relevance would be debated and reevaluated multiple times as the timeline was scrutinized. The second check was conducted by Matthew Oldfield, another member of the group, at approximately 9:30. Oldfield offered to check the McCann apartment while checking his own adjacent unit. His statement details that he entered apartment 5A through the patio doors. He did not fully enter the children's bedroom, but stood in the doorway. He noted seeing the twin beds occupied, but did not physically verify the presence of Madeleine in the 3rd bed, assuming she was present due to the silence in the room. He also noted that the bedroom door was open, allowing light from the living area to spill in. This specific procedural oversight, visual confirmation of the room, but not the specific individual, left a 30-minute window where the status of the child was unverified. It is at this juncture that the timeline becomes fragmented by conflicting witness accounts and crucial gaps in the data. Between 9:30 and 10 o'clock, the activity on the streets surrounding the Ocean Club is the subject of intense scrutiny. At 10 o'clock, Kate McCann left the table for her turn to check the children. Her statement describes entering through the patio doors. She immediately noticed the door to the children's bedroom was wide open, slammed shut by a draft as she entered. Upon opening the door again, she observed that the window was open and the external shutter had been raised all the way to the top. The bed previously occupied by Madeleine was empty. She briefly searched the apartment, checking the parents' bedroom and the bathroom, assuming the child might have wandered. Finding no trace of the child, she ran back to the restaurant. Witness statements from the dining group describe her arrival at the table as frantic. The alarm was raised at approximately 10:03. The immediate aftermath of the alarm marks the beginning of what procedural experts term the golden hour, the critical window immediately following a disappearance where evidence preservation is paramount. Reports indicate a significant breakdown in protocol during this phase. Following the announcement at the restaurant, the entire dining group, along with resort staff, descended upon apartment 5A. The timeline shows that a chaotic, unstructured search began. Individuals entered and exited the apartment multiple times. Light switches were toggled, surfaces were touched, and potential forensic evidence was compromised. Procedural analysis of the scene management suggests that the contamination levels in the apartment within the first 60 minutes rendered many subsequent forensic tests inconclusive. Staff logs show the first call to the Portuguese police, the GNR, was not made until 10:41, nearly 40 minutes after the alarm was raised. This delay is significant. During this 40-minute window, the group and resort staff conducted a search of the immediate premises, the swimming pools, and the surrounding roads. The GNR officers arrived at the location at 11:10. Their initial report characterizes the situation as a missing person case rather than a criminal inquiry. This classification dictated the resources deployed in the first critical hours. The GNR is primarily a patrol force, distinct from the Criminal Investigation Agency. Upon arrival, 2 officers entered the apartment. According to the case file, the officers conducted a cursory search and then notified the policia judiciaria. It was not until 1 o'clock in the morning on May 4th, 3 hours after the disappearance was discovered, that the policia judiciaria were formally notified. Detectives from the PJ did not arrive at the location until later that morning. This delay created a significant gap in the investigative timeline. Critical actions, such as the immediate closure of borders or the establishment of roadblocks on main arteries leaving Praia de Luz, were not implemented during the initial hours. Records indicate that border controls were not alerted until much later the following day, by which time travel out of the region would have been unmonitored. The preservation of the location connected to the case continued to be an issue. By the time the PJ forensic team arrived to examine apartment 5A, it was estimated that more than 20 people had entered the premises. The GNR had not sealed the location with tamper-evident tape immediately upon arrival. There was no log of entry and exit maintained during the crucial period between 10 o'clock at night and 1 o'clock in the morning. Initial observations by the McCanns suggested forced entry. Kate McCann noted the open window and the raised shutter. However, subsequent examination of the shutters by investigators revealed no signs of forced entry. The shutters could only be raised from the inside using a strap, or from the outside if they were already partially open. The lack of physical damage to the shutters or the window mechanism led investigators to conflicting theories regarding how the individual or individuals responsible gained access or egress. Additionally, the timeline of the search expanded rapidly outward from the apartment. By 2 o'clock in the morning, staff and guests were searching the resort grounds and the surrounding streets of Praia de Luz. While well-intentioned, this mass movement of people further complicated the forensic landscape of the exterior perimeter. Potential footprints or tire tracks in the immediate vicinity of the apartment block were likely obliterated by the foot traffic of the search parties. The doctrine of evidence in this case relies heavily on negative findings. There was no CCTV footage covering the entrance to apartment 5A or the immediate patio area. The resort's security infrastructure was minimal. Therefore, the reconstruction of events relies almost entirely on the consistency of the witness statements provided by the Tapas 7 and the resort staff. One specific inconsistency noted in the early files involves the description of the locking mechanism on the patio doors. While the McCanns stated the door was left unlocked, other reports suggested it could only be locked from the inside. This detail is procedurally significant because it dictates the potential points of entry. If the door was unlocked, access was silent and simple. If it was locked, access would require force or a key. The lack of damage to the door frame supported the theory of entry via an unlocked door or entry by someone with a key. By sunrise on May 4th, the procedural failures of the night had solidified. The perimeter had been breached countless times. The border alert system was delayed. The separation and interviewing of key witnesses were not conducted immediately, allowing for potential cross-contamination of witness memories. The GNR and PJ jurisdictional handoff resulted in a loss of momentum during the most critical phase of the inquiry. The context of the investigation is thus defined by these structural and procedural realities. A resort layout that allowed for rear access, a system of checks that left gaps of 20 to 30 minutes, a patio door left unlocked for convenience, and a delayed law enforcement response that missed the immediate window for containment. The physical evidence available to investigators was limited from the outset by the contamination of the scene and the lack of CCTV coverage on the specific pathways leading away from the Ocean Club. Further complicating the context is the jurisdiction. The interaction between the local Portuguese police and the British authorities created friction regarding protocol and information sharing. The Portuguese system relies heavily on the secrecy of justice, meaning specific details of the ongoing investigation could not be shared publicly or even with the parents' legal team, leading to a vacuum of information that was rapidly filled by media speculation. The records from the days immediately following the disappearance show a shift in focus. The initial search radius was expanded. Sniffer dogs were brought in, though their deployment was delayed. The analysis of phone records from the area began, aiming to identify all active mobile devices in the vicinity of the Ocean Club between 9 and 10 in the evening. This data dump, known as a tower dump, revealed thousands of connections, creating a massive logistical challenge for analysts attempting to isolate unregistered or suspicious numbers. By August 2007, the direction of the inquiry shifted. The Portuguese authorities requested the assistance of specialized canine units from the United Kingdom. 2 English Springer Spaniels were brought to the location. One dog was trained to detect the scent of human biological material, while the other was trained to detect the scent of human mortality. The procedural reports detailing the canine inspection are extensive. The dogs were taken through apartment 5A. The mortality detection dog alerted to an area behind the sofa in the living room and near the wardrobe in the main bedroom. The biological detection dog also alerted to the same area behind the sofa. Furthermore, the dogs were tasked with inspecting the vehicle rented by the parents weeks after the disappearance. The records indicate that the dogs provided an alert response to the key fob and the boot of the vehicle. Following these alerts, forensic samples were collected from the areas indicated by the canines. These samples were sent to the Forensic Science Service in Birmingham for DNA analysis. The results, however, were not definitive. The report indicated that the DNA markers recovered were too degraded and complex to form a conclusive match. While some markers were consistent with the child, the analysis could not rule out the possibility that the DNA came from contact transfer, such as a dirty diaper or clothing, rather than a direct biological deposit related to a fatal event. The scientific interpretation of this evidence became a subject of intense debate between the Portuguese investigators and British forensic experts. The files reflect a clash in procedural philosophy. The Portuguese authorities viewed the dog alerts as significant indicators of deception, while British protocol generally dictates that canine alerts must be corroborated by physical evidence to be prosecutable. In September 2007, the status of the investigation changed formally. The parents were interviewed separately at the police headquarters. During these sessions, they were declared argydos, or persons of interest. This procedural designation allowed the police to ask more direct questions and afforded the parents certain legal protections, such as the right to remain silent. The interrogation transcripts reveal the investigators focused heavily on the timeline discrepancies and the forensic alerts. They hypothesized that an accident had occurred in the apartment and that the disappearance was a staged event to conceal the reality of the situation. The parents vehemently denied these allegations, maintaining that the child had been taken by an intruder. The investigation stalled in the months following these interviews. Without a confession, a human body, or definitive forensic evidence linking the parents, or a third party to a crime, the Portuguese prosecutor faced a lack of prosecutable material. The files show that the initial theory of abduction was never fully discarded, but the lack of physical traces leaving the apartment, such as footprints or fibers, hampered that line of inquiry. Conversely, the theory regarding the parents lacked the conclusive DNA evidence required for prosecution. In July 2008, the Portuguese Attorney General announced that the investigation would be shelved. The argydo status of the parents was lifted, and the case was archived, pending the emergence of new evidence. The final report from this phase of the investigation highlighted the procedural failures of the first 24 hours. The failure to seal the apartment, the delay in closing the borders, and the lack of immediate, rigorous witness separation. Following the closure of the Portuguese inquiry, private investigators were hired by the family to continue the search. These files, while not official police documents, generated thousands of leads. They focused on sketching potential persons of interest and re-examining the Smith sighting. This lead, distinct from the Tanner sighting, involved a report from an Irish family who saw a man carrying a child toward the beach at approximately 10 o'clock that evening. It was not until 2011, when Scotland Yard launched Operation Grange, that a systematic review of the entire case file began. The British review team digitized and cross-referenced over 40,000 documents. Their analysis identified gaps in the original timeline and highlighted individuals who had not been properly vetted. The review process involved translating thousands of pages of Portuguese statements and re-interviewing witnesses who had been at the resort. One key finding of Operation Grange was the importance of cell site analysis, which placed certain individuals in proximity to the apartment who had previously gone unnoticed. Furthermore, the review effectively ruled out the Tanner sighting as a significant lead, identifying the man seen as another tourist returning to his apartment with his own child. The investigation into the disappearance of the child remains a study in procedural complexity. It illustrates how the initial hours of a case define the trajectory of the entire inquiry. The loss of potential evidence in the unsecured apartment, the reliance on fallible witness memory for timelines, and the jurisdictional friction between international agencies created a fragmented picture of events. To this day, the files remain open, a collection of statements, timelines, and forensic reports that have yet to resolve into a single, proven conclusion. The tangible records tell a story of a search that began in chaos and became a decades-long procedural labyrinth.